don't have a budget. The way the budget is handled, I think, will be an indicator of whether we can have bipartisan cooperation. It's not just the budget for the year. We have disaster relief for the people of Texas and Florida, California, and Puerto Rico. We have the immigration issues that need to be dealt with now. And I think the manner in which that is handled can set the stage for Congress, Democrats and Republicans working together. Or if they can't, if the president won't work with us, it's going to be a tough year.
Well, let me ask you about a couple of specifics, a few specifics that I just raised with Mark Short. There's infrastructure, there's immigration, there's welfare reform. In those specific areas, do you see the outlines of a compromise with the president?
Oh, there's been negotiations between Democrats and Republicans on immigration. We're hoping that we can get the Dreamer bill done. We also have people, with as is pointed out, on temporary protective status. We have to deal with that issue. Mark's right. We should pass legislation in these areas. The president's made it more difficult, but we need to get together, and we have Democrats and Republicans working together. On infrastructure, absolutely we want to get an infrastructure bill done. It's more challenging because of the tax bill and the revenues that have been taken off the table, but we could work together and get something done on that.
In terms of immigration, as I was talking about, there is an obvious deal to be made there. On the one hand, you and some Republicans want to give protection to the Dreamers. On the other hand, Republicans, and especially this president, want tougher border enforcement, including funding for the wall. Would you be willing to compromise there?
We need to get the Dreamer issue done. It should not be connected to anything else. In regards to border security,
wait a minute, Senator,
yes.
That's not a compromise, because you have something you want in immigration, they have something they want. Why not put them together?
Well, of course, the president put the deadline when he gave 6 months earlier this year. So we have a deadline on the Dreamers. We should do better border security. We're for border security, but let's make it sensible border security. Let's deal with the technologies on the border. Let's deal with the real problems there. The wall is not going to make us safer.
All right, let's turn to your particular area of expertise, which is foreign policy. You heard my discussion just now with Mark Short about the Trump administration issuing a threat to the UN and to its member nations about not voting against his decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Here at the UN was our ambassador, Nikki Haley.
No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered.
Senator, what do you make of the president issuing that threat? And what happens in Congress if the president tries to make good on the threat and to cut funding either to some of the countries that opposed us or to the UN itself?
Well, first, as has been pointed out, the United States recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the Congress did that in 1995. The country has the right to determine its own capital. I don't think it was a controversial move, but the manner in which he handled it, without using diplomacy, without trying to advance the peace process, using this to put other issues on the table so we could get the Palestinians and Israelis talking together, that, I think, was the mistake. So the reaction in the United Nations, I think, was expected. I don't know whether it's useful to make threats. We do watch how the countries in the United Nations vote on our resolutions. We always do that. But I think the manner in which the president handled this is not in our best national security interest.
All right, let's turn to another subject. The U.S. pushed a resolution through the UN Security Council on Friday imposing new sanctions against North Korea, including sharp new limits on petroleum shipments to North Korea. And the vote got the support of both China and Russia. It was 15-0 in the Security Council. Doesn't that indicate that the Trump administration diplomacy to try to build up international support against North Korea is working?
That was a good move. That was a major accomplishment. I give our team a lot of credit for getting that done. There are pretty strong additional sanctions to be imposed against North Korea because of their continued testing of ballistic missiles. So that is absolutely, it was a strong move forward. It was great to see China and Russia join us in that. It now needs to be followed up with diplomacy, where we get China and the United States working with the same strategy with North Korea to find a way that we can ease the tension and get North Korea to change directions. So it was a good first step.
Another trouble spot, Ukraine. The president has agreed to sell lethal weapons to Ukraine, including anti-tank missiles, to fight the pro-Russian separatist forces there. This is a move that President Obama has consistently for years refused to make. Will you support that, or will you try to block the sale in Congress?
I talked to Secretary Tillerson earlier this week. I support the administration's decision to provide these types of defensive weapons for the Ukrainians. It's a clear message to Russia that we will not allow them to continue to compromise the sovereignty of Ukraine. Russia will continue to push as far as they can. It was important for the United States to tell Russia that we will support Ukraine's ability to defend itself. So I support the decision.
Overall, how do you think the administration has done this first year in foreign policy? And are you troubled that we have a Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who almost everybody in Washington thinks is going to be gone within a year? Has he lost his credibility as he travels the world representing this country?
In many respects, our foreign policy is inconsistent. We'll have a policy coming out of the State Department or coming out from people that are representing the White House, and then have the president come out with a tweet that totally undermines that. We saw that in North Korea when Secretary Tillerson was pursuing diplomacy, and then the president undercut his ability with a tweet. So I think we found from the president he doesn't always support his team, and therefore we have an inconsistent message. We have distant America. When we say America first, it looks like America in isolation, and America's lost its leadership in many key issues. That's certainly true on climate change, where we were not as present and bond as we should have on climate talks. China came in and took a lot of the leadership that should have been with the United States. So we see the United States being excluded from a lot of the discussions globally, and that's not helpful to our national security.
Senator, I want to put up some numbers for you that I think are fairly striking. We now have growth of 3%, unemployment just over 4%. The Dow Jones average is up almost 25% since the Trump inauguration. ISIS has lost 97% of the land it once controlled in Iraq and Syria. For all the controversies, for all the questions about this administration, when you look back on all of that, hasn't President Trump had a pretty good year?
I think it reflects the fact that America is the strongest nation in the world, that what we can do, this country really is indispensable to the global community, and that there were seeds planted by both Democratic and Republican administrations that have caused us to continue to grow. But as we do that, there's a lot of Americans who have been left behind. And I think that's the key challenge. We have a shrinking middle class. We've got to focus on a growing middle class. And I think there was a missed opportunity on this tax bill where it helped basically large corporations and high-income people. If we could have focused on middle income, we could have, I think, helped grow the middle class, which would have been good for our future. Things are good. They could be better, and let's concentrate on middle-income families.
Okay, I got less than a minute left. I want to ask you about one last area. Congress has been investigating the whole Russia issue for about a year. The Justice Department has been investigating possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russia for a year and a half. Really, two questions. First of all, do you feel any urgency to wrap this up, to remove the cloud over our president if it can be removed? And secondly, what do you think of the tweets, and it's continued this week, on the attacks against the FBI?
I think it's critically important that we respect the independence of the Department of Justice and the FBI. No one's above the law. Let Mr. Mueller do his investigation without interference from the president. In regards to this investigation, I hope it is completed early. I think the American people need to understand exactly what Russia was doing here in the United States and the involvement with the Trump campaign. It would be helpful for this country to have as much that information made available as quickly as possible.
Senator Cardin, thank you. Thanks for your time, and happy holidays to you and your family, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Same to you.
Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to look back at 2017. Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about the president's first year in office? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.
I tried hard to quit smoking. But when we brought our daughter home, that was it. Now I have Nicoderm CQ.
The Nicoderm CQ patch with unique extended release technology helps prevent your urge to smoke all day.
It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Every great why needs a great how.
I'm Jillian, and I have a confession to make. I may have been a little tough in my past. Down! Up! Go! Go! But now I've found my bubbly side with SodaStream, the effortless way to stop addiction to sugary soda. Just slip in a bottle of regular tap water, a quick push, and in seconds, plain boring water is sparkling. Add a little fruit drop flavor, and boom, a sparkling treat you'll want to drink. With soda with SodaStream.
Available at GetSodaStream.com or at these fine retailers.
Fries for 316, please. Thank you.
David, what's going on? Oh, hey. That's it? Yeah. Everybody, 2 seconds.
Dear Sebastian, after careful consideration of your application, it is with great pleasure that we offer our congratulations on your acceptance.
Through the Tuition Assistance Program, every day, McDonald's helps more people go to college. It's part of our commitment to being America's best first job.
I want to get my daddy something he'll really, really, really love.
We have a whole section for that. If it was my dad, I'd give him this.
Open mine first. It's a Crafts Around 2 set.
Oh, I really, really, really love it.
This holiday, take everything you love about Christmas and wrap it in red. Because right now, Ace has the perfect gifts at the perfect price.
Merry Christmas, Daddy.
Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks.
What makes this simple salad the best simple salad ever? Heart-healthy California walnuts. The best simple pasta ever? California walnuts. The best simple dinner ever? Great tasting, heart-healthy California walnuts. So simple, so good. Get the recipes at walnuts.org.
Set my boy free.
17 million to release him.
I don't have any money.
Your father-in-law has all the money in the world.
How much would you pay to release your grandson?
Nothing.
Tell him I'm coming.
All the money in the world. Rated R. In theaters tomorrow.
My life motto is keep moving. And as hard as it was when my husband passed away, I knew I had to keep doing what I love. Oops. Coming. But I needed help with my insurance, and that's what the NAIC provides. They have resources to help you and your family make the best decision, and they'll help you to keep moving forward, just like me.
Help the rich, hurt the middle class. The whole year can be summed up in that one sentence.
And unfortunately, the Democrats don't like to see tax cutting. They like to see tax increases. And they like to complain, but they don't get it done, unfortunately, but they complain a lot.
President Trump and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer wrapping up 2017 with two very different takes on Congress passing the Republican tax bill. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Former National Security Council staffer and now a Fox News correspondent, Jillian Turner, columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams, Bob Woodward from The Washington Post, and Fox News politics editor Chris Steyerwalt. Merry Christmas Eve to all of you, and thank you for coming in. Jillian, there were certainly times this year when it appeared that the Trump presidency was headed off the tracks. But when you look back at the numbers that the economic numbers I just showed Senator Cardin, the success with ISIS, now the passage of the signature tax cut bill, has 2017 turned out to be a pretty good year for President Trump?
It's definitely ending on a high note, is the way that I would describe it. Specifically with the stock market booming, on the foreign policy side of things, ISIS has been really the sweet spot for the administration this year. The United States military has decimated their strongholds in Iraq and Syria, essentially denying them any claims to a legitimate caliphate. The challenge on this and many other issues is that the world, at the risk of sounding trite, the world is a complex place today, and the nature of all the threats we face as a nation are changing. They're evolving very quickly. So if we take ISIS as an example, we have had great success militarily. The new front in the war on terror next year and beyond is really going to be in cyberspace. So the question is, how quickly can the administration adapt? How can they take these policy successes and translate them in the future?
We ask you for questions for the panel, and we got this on Facebook from Christopher Fauver, who writes, is Trump going to be another Reagan? Thought to be a lightweight, but gets conservative agenda put in action. Juan, how do you answer, Christopher?
Well, I think if you look at the past year, picking up on what Jillian was saying, you'd have to say that in terms of putting conservative judges on the courts, in terms of things like the dismantling of regulations, the regulatory state, Trump has had some success. Or I would say, actually, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell have had success while using Trump almost as a distraction. To me, when you think about Ronald Reagan, it was the ability to negotiate at times across the aisle. I don't think Trump has that. I'm not sure I can point to one Republican who would say he voted for the tax bill because of Trump. I think the deals were struck by, for example, in the Senate, McConnell, Anwar drilling for Lisa Murkowski, you know, something of a promise on health care going to Susan Collins of Maine, something promised about immigration reform to Jeff Flake. That's the so-called swamp that Trump once promised to drain. Actually, McConnell, I think, has poured some water and muck into that swamp.
One of the president's complaints is that he doesn't get a fair shake from the mainstream media. Mr. Williams, a perfect example of that. Here was the president on Friday as he signed the tax bill.
Legislative approvals, for which I'm given no credit in the mainstream media. We have, I believe it's 88, which is #1 in the history of our country.
Chris, is this presidency the hot mess it's often portrayed as being, or does President Trump have a point?
Well, I think he very much has a point. I think he has a point that much of the coverage about him has been withering and unfairly so. But then again, much of the coverage has also been fairly harsh because, as we've already alluded to, the opening stanzas of this presidency, the first 8 months, 10 months, were very, very off kilter. And he had a hard run getting started. So much of the coverage that was harsh was unfair. And he also benefits, by the way, from a lot of very favorable coverage and talking points from his boosters out there. So I don't think we can just say that he is a victim.
Bob, I want to continue on this theme. You're writing a book about Donald Trump that's going to come out next year. At
an undetermined date.
You're having problems making the deadline with your editor?
There's so much, and getting your arms around it is difficult. It's hard.
Trying to rush the process.
Well, wait. What are you finding? Is part of the story how much he has changed as president, or how little he's changed as president?
Well, I can't really answer that. What's interesting, there's a discussion going on about whether there is within the Trump presidency a crisis of legitimacy. And I think as you look back on it, there is not, actually. He was elected. Ben Cardin, Democrat, was saying, gee, I agree with this, I agree with that. Much disagreement on the tax cut, but we're going to see. As we know, in tax cuts, it depends on outcomes. The condition of the economy is good now, supposedly. We will see. So that can't be measured. So at the same time, there's been a lot of turmoil in the Trump presidency. One of the people I talked to called it a chaos furnace. And there's a lot of truth in that, and that's Trump's style. And a lot of that is done intentionally with his tweets in the morning, which you talk to anyone on the staff, and there is no clearinghouse for his tweets. He's going to do it all on his own. And that's defined a lot.
Do you agree with, I'm surprised is a consensus, it seems to be on this panel, that the president has ended the year much stronger than he started?
Well, the tax cut's important, and look at foreign affairs. There's been lots of anxiety, rightfully so, that maybe there's going to be a war with North Korea. I think that's been turned down. ISIS is a plus, maybe, but, you know, we'll have to see. I mean, you're exactly right. It is a dangerous world, but the fuse of instability is lit in so many countries, and the crisis can come from a place we least expected. I'm looking at this, and there are dozens of places that can go off and wind up defining the presidency. And so, you know, that's why I'm waiting to finish the book.
Gillian, how does this president compare both in substance and style points to the two presidents that you work for in the National Security Council, Bush 43 and Obama?
I think it's fair to say that President Trump is different in every way imaginable, both and they were very different from one another, President Obama and President Bush. President Trump is temperamentally different. I think his worldview is different from any president we've potentially seen before. And I think what he is, you know, the end of the year always offers this opportunity to sort of talk about lessons learned. And I think one of the things the administration has done well is that they've learned to adapt some fairly outlandish policy ideas to suit the swamp and to suit the Congress, and they've become, like, there's no better example than the travel ban, the president's beloved travel ban. If you look at the first version, it was fairly outrageous. Everything from what it said on paper to how it was rolled out. We go from there to the second, and then the third version has sort of passed without much controversy. And trying to, I think, you know, they're coming to terms with the fact that the president doesn't have all the prerogative in the world, and if he wants to get these fairly controversial things through, he's going to have to learn to adapt. He's adapting to the swamp.
Can I just throw in there, when you were saying that there's a consensus on the panel, I think my part to contribution to this consensus would be that the right-wing agenda in America has been advanced by a Republican Congress, McConnell and Ryan. But if you look at the tax bill, remember Trump promised to cut increase taxes on the rich, get rid of carried interest for the hedge fund people. The exact opposite has come through because of the agenda, McConnell, Ryan, in terms of cutting taxes on the upper income and in terms of beginning a tax on the social safety net that I anticipate to come on Medicare, Social Security, and the like, because they'll say the revenue's not there.
I think you can rest easy, Mr. Williams. I do not think that is in the offing at any time soon.
You don't think that Ryan has promised that?
Well, I'm sure they promised.
Folks, you have another panel, and I don't want you to steal time from yourselves on the other side of the break. So we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll look ahead to President Trump's prospects for a year or two, his policy agenda, the political challenges, and yes, the continuing Russia investigation.
Before I had the shooting, burning, pins and needles of diabetic nerve pain, these feet grew into a freewheeling kid, loved every step of fatherhood, and made old cars good as new. But I couldn't bear my diabetic nerve pain any longer. So I talked to my doctor, and he prescribed Lyrica.
Nerve damage from diabetes causes diabetic nerve pain. Lyrica is FDA approved to treat this pain, from moderate to even severe diabetic nerve pain. Lyrica may cause serious allergic reactions, suicidal thoughts or actions. Tell your doctor right away if you have these, new or worse depression, unusual changes in mood or behavior, swelling, trouble breathing, rash, hives, blisters, muscle pain with fever, tired feeling, or blurry vision. Common side effects: dizziness, sleepiness, weight gain, swelling of hands, legs, and feet. Don't drink alcohol while taking Lyrica. Don't drive or use machinery until you know how Lyrica affects you. Those who've had a drug or alcohol problem may be more likely to misuse Lyrica.
Now I have less diabetic nerve pain, and I love smoothing the road ahead for others.
Ask your doctor about Lyrica.
A crucial conservative voice. We look at the extraordinary journey of one of America's most influential figures, Charles Krauthammer. A Life That Matters, anchored by Brett Baer.
If you're only hungry for a slice of apple pie, why buy the whole pie? And you certainly wouldn't want to pay for an all-you-can-eat buffet. So if you don't use your cell phone that much, why get charged for a plan that's too big, or even an unlimited plan? Luckily, there's still a wireless company that shares your values. Welcome to Consumer Cellular. Our average customer pays about $25 a month for everything they need. Many pay even less, as plans start at just $15 a month. You'll get a straightforward bill that's easy to understand with no surprises and all the attention you deserve from our friendly customer service team. No wonder Consumer Cellular has received the J.D. Power Award for highest customer service 3 times in a row. Plus, if you're an AARP member, you'll receive special discounts. It's easy to switch. You can even keep your phone and your number. Now, for a limited time, get a $20 credit on any new line of service. Call 1-800-379-5785. Go online or visit a Target store today.
Nice going, Spencer. I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
Yeah,
you never mean you're well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
It's always a lot of fun when you win. If you work hard and lose, that's not acceptable.
President Trump celebrating with congressional Republicans the passage of his first major legislative win, that big tax cut, and promising more victories in 2018. And we're back now with the panel. Well, Chris, you heard the president's legislative director, Mark Short, laying out a pretty ambitious agenda for 2018. How much of that will actually get done, given the fact that they don't have reconciliation? They got to pass it with 9 Democratic votes in the Senate, and that you've got the midterms coming up in November.
Well, look, even before they begin negotiating with Democrats, and it is, of course, the kind of pivot that we had anticipated from the president, really from the beginning, reach out to Democrats, infrastructure, find ways to build this new populist, almost centrist in some ways, on domestic policy agenda. But they have a big rhubarb to settle among Republicans before they figure out what they're going to do there, because they made a lot of promises to ideologically disparate Republicans in order to get the tax bill passed. That bill is coming due really in January through March, as they have to deal with DACA, illegal immigrants who were brought to the United States as minors. They have to deal with the questions of fixing Obamacare or patching Obamacare for the year. Different promises to different people. And then on top of that, you want to talk about changing entitlement reform. Rand Paul closes the year in the Senate saying, we're coming back, we're cutting spending, we're coming back, we're cutting welfare. And tell me how you make that all fit.
One thing that struck me about the president's event on the South Lawn this week after he had signed the tax cut bill was how much, and this picks up on what Jillian said, he's adapted to Washington. He was calling out not just the leaders, because it seemed when he came, he knew about 4 names of people in Congress. He was calling out committee chairmen. He was calling out subcommittee chairmen. Has he gotten better? And in fact, has he begun to master the art of the legislative deal?
Well, I think what you said is true. And by the way, what a show of sycophancy. I mean, it's unbelievable that exhibit at the White House. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought it was kind of like some authoritarian leader from some other country in front of his, self-selected leaders. Oh, dear leader, we love you, Mr. Trump. Good God. Anyway, I think that what you have seen is that he has more familiarity with Congress and understands that he has to make deals through Congress. But
well, of course he's got to make deals through Congress. I mean, Ronald Reagan had to make deals through Congress. Bill Clinton did.
Yes.
My point is...
But I'm not sure he recognized that when he started.
I understand, but would you agree that he now does understand that?
No, even in the tax bill, it's not that he put forward, with Mark Short's help, some legislative agenda or structure that allowed them to act. It was that they came up with their own prescriptions to their conservative agenda.
You're not going to give him any credit.
No, I think he knows now, some members of Congress, and understands he's got to work with Congress. But for example, Mark Short said to you, we want to do something on infrastructure. And what you hear from the Democrats in the Senate, as we heard this morning, is, yeah, we want to do something on infrastructure, but where's the revenue? You just passed a tax bill that took away the money.
No, that's true. That was $1 trillion that they wanted to get, that they were going to put into infrastructure. Now it's only another $1 trillion they got to find. It's over 10 years. Anyway, casting a shadow over everything is a continuing investigation of Russia. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer put the president on notice this week.
If the president were to fire Special Counsel Mueller, our country would face a constitutional crisis.
Bob, as a veteran of covering Watergate, of covering Iran-Contra, of covering the Monica Lewinsky, where are we headed in 2018? You hear White House lawyers saying that this is going to be wrapped up quickly, that the president, at least as far as the president's concerned, maybe not Paul Manafort, that he's going to be exonerated early in 2018. And you hear some Democrats say they're just getting started.
My analysis and information is that we reporters and the public only know a sliver of what's going on in that investigation, and we also only know a sliver of what really happened. Mueller is the special counsel here, has extraordinary power in law. Supreme Court decision in the Nixon case saying you as the investigator have the power to get the evidence. In the case of Nixon, it was the tapes. So Mueller presumably can get all evidence and testimony on this. So we don't know where it's going to go. I think one of the big problems here is our business, the media. You see the declarations about, oh, we know this is going to lead to impeachment, or the declarations that it's going to be over, it's going to go away. I suspect if we had Mueller here on sodium pentothal, the truth serum.
I would love that. Let me tell you.
Well, try.
Wow. I think when I come at him with a hypodermic, it's going to be a problem.
Sometimes you have to roll the dice. Donald Trump knows that. And I think he likely would say, I don't know. This is a process. He's very exhaustive. And that's exactly the way it should be.
But let me ask you, because Congress has been investigating this question for a year. The Justice Department has been investigating this question of possible collusion for a year and a half, since the summer of 2016. Why don't we have any sense at all, if there is any, of any collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign?
A fair question. And, you know, maybe we won't. Maybe the trail will become cold. We don't know. But these things take time. Mueller started in May. That's the really serious investigation. But I think in the discussion about it, and what is somebody who's done this for, God, 47 years, there is in the media this polarization and people attacking Trump, and the kind of self-satisfaction and smugness and ridicule, which I think does not work at all. And on the other side, oh, Trump is totally right. This is innocent. This is some sort of jihad against him. And I think we need to turn that down and listen to facts. There are facts out there, and be a little restrained.
I couldn't agree more, but good luck to you in trying to get that done. Jillian, I want to get you into this. On the foreign policy front, North Korea, Russia, China, Middle East, what are you looking for in 2018?
So I think, just quickly on North Korea, the big variable is whether or not we end up at war with the North Korean regime. I'm not refuting Bob, I wouldn't dare do that, but I don't think the question of whether or not we're going to war with the North is at all settled at this time. I hope you're right and I'm wrong. On Russia, the investigation aside, I think the U.S.-Russia bilateral relationship is taking a nosedive. That is evidenced by the fact that the announcement this week that we're now providing them with this major defensive capability in the form of lethal weapons.
President Ukraine.
To Ukraine.
Right.
President Trump is learning what all his predecessors have learned, which is that Vladimir Putin cannot be trusted and cannot be worked with, even on the issues where we share common national security interests. And I think that has been a particularly difficult lesson for him, because he started with high hopes of turning the tide in favor of working with Putin. So I think that's going to die a very quick death.
And in about 40 seconds? the Middle East.
And the Middle East, the Middle East at large, I think some major humanitarian concerns for the administration in 2018. We've got Yemen on the brink of one of the worst famines the world has ever seen, potentially, thanks to the Saudi blockade. The Trump administration is trying to really exert the special relationship to try to get them to back down. That will be a huge test for the region generally, I think.
And ISIS?
And ISIS's online caliphate is flourishing. So the big test for the Trump administration is, can we fight them online as well as we have fought them on the battlefield?
Well, it's going to be a fascinating year, and we will all be here to cover it fairly and in a smug-free zone.
Hear, hear.
Thank you,
well
panel.
said.
See you next Sunday. Have a Merry Christmas. Up next, our Power Player of the Week, honoring America's veterans this holiday season. Plus, another visit from the Wallace grandkids.
Sure, it's his gift, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it too. Now at Men's Warehouse, take 60% off sweaters and coats, plus 60% off designer suits. You're gonna like the way he looks.
I personally guarantee that my pillow will be the most comfortable pillow you'll ever own. It's machine washable and dryable, comes with a 10-year warranty and my 60-day money-back guarantee. Go to mypillow.com or call now to order one of my pillows. Use the promo code and I'll give you a second MyPillow absolutely free.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
It's a Christmas tradition here to share the story of how one family has found a way to express the meaning of the holiday season. It's a moving example of love for our country and personal generosity. Once again, here is our Power Player of the Week.
We wouldn't have the opportunities if it wasn't for the people that fought for us and gave their lives for us.
It's that plain-spoken wisdom that has driven Moral Worcester for years on a mission that has touched America's heart. Each December, Worcester places wreaths at Arlington National Cemetery, and thousands of volunteers are there to help him.
I think a lot of people think like I do, and they just want to, they appreciate the veterans and they want to show it.
This story begins back in 1962, when Worcester, then a 12-year-old paper boy from Maine, won a trip to Washington. What impressed him most was Arlington, its beauty and dignity, and those rows and rows of graves.
Everyone represents a life and a family and a story. They're not just tombstones. I mean, those are all people.
30 years later, in 1992, Worcester was running his own wreath company in Harrington, Maine. But as Christmas approached, he had a bunch left over.
These wreaths were real fresh, right, just made, and I just didn't want to throw them away.
He thought of Arlington and all those graves. When the cemetery approved, he and a dozen volunteers drove the wreaths down and laid them on the headstones. And so it continued for years, until a few Christmases back, when an Air Force sergeant took this picture, which ended up on the internet.
It kind of struck a nerve, and people emailed it to each other, and it really went around the world.
Go on right there.
There you go, sir.
We were there the next year as he and his workers at the Worcester Wreath Company loaded up 5,265 wreaths. Then they embarked on what Worcester calls the world's longest Veterans Parade, a 750-mile journey that at some points attracted more than 100 vehicles. And when they got to Arlington, so many people wanted to participate.
The ceremony you are about to witness is an Army wreath-laying ceremony to be conducted for the Worcester Wreath Company.
For years, Worcester paid for all of this out of his own pocket. And he started Wreaths Across America, sending hundreds to cemeteries and war memorials around the country. But he will need help to reach his new goal.
I think there are around 2.7 million graves. And that's a tall order to decorate 2.7 million graves. So,
but you'd like to do it, wouldn't you?
I really would, yeah, sometime. I don't know how, but hey, you know.
How long are you going to keep doing this?
I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I work, and then I know my family is going to continue. So it'll be here for a long time.
This is the 26th year Morrill Worcester has taken on his Christmas wreath project. This month, volunteers placed more than 1.5 million wreaths on veterans' graves at over 1,400 locations in all 50 states. And now another Christmas tradition. Here's a look from the last 3 years at all 5 of the Wallace grandkids. And now, here they are again, and they keep growing. Caroline, Livy, Sabine, James, and William. From our family to yours, have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you
next Fox News Sunday.
You've gotten quite professional at that. All right, guys. 3, 2, 1.
Merry Christmas!
Hasn't been done in 34 years, but actually really hasn't been done because we broke every record. It's the largest, I always say the most massive, but it's the largest tax cut in the history of our country, and reform, but tax cut.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. That was President Donald Trump this week following the passage of his first major piece of legislation, a historic tax cut package that will deliver the most sweeping reform to the code in 3 decades. But while Republicans were taking their victory lap, not everyone on Capitol Hill was celebrating.
Now we know they're popping champagne down Pennsylvania Avenue. There are only 2 places where America's popping champagne: the White House and the corporate boardrooms, including Trump Tower.
The GOP tax scam is about bleeding the middle class dry to pad the pockets of corporate America and the wealthiest 1%.
Joining the panel this week, Wall Street Journal columnist and deputy editor Dan Henninger, columnist Kim Strassel, and Mary Anastasia O'Grady, and editorial page writer Kate Batchelder Odell. So, Kate, why did they succeed on taxes when they failed on health care?
Right. I mean, that is one question, because you would expect a failure to produce more failure or make it harder to succeed. But I think here the health care failure really focused the minds for the it wasn't always clear they would choose do. But also, I think there was a rougher consensus on what a tax bill should look like, where on health care, a lot of variety. You know, some wanted to keep Medicaid an open-ended entitlement. Other people wanted a spending cap. And what's the compromise in that binary choice?
So, Mary, still some philosophical coherence still there, at least on taxes for the Republicans, unlike health care. Some people on the edges did want to turn the tax cut into a more redistributionist tax cut, and that restrains some of the rate cuts on the individual side. But still, they got the main stuff done.
Yeah. I think, actually, there's a story about how Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, Democrat,
pulled Rob Portman aside and said, look, we'll work with you, we'll come along with you, but you have to make the corporate tax rate 25%. And Portman took that back to the Republicans and they said no. And I think that shows the level of discipline that they decided to adhere to, specifically on the corporate tax rate. I mean, that was the thing they wanted to get done. Everything else that got done in this was sort of built around that. But, you know, the Republicans are different than the Democrats. And the Democrats keep saying that there was this, you know, far right-wing extremism. But there is a difference. Democrats believe in basically socializing the profits, and Republicans believe that you have to create wealth before you try to redistribute it. And their goal here was to change the corporate structure so that there would be more wealth creation. That was a goal that they refused to let go of.
And on that target of the corporate tax cut, Dan, I think you got to give President Trump credit for saying 20% is what I want. And by setting that goal out there and saying we don't want to get away from that, he made it harder for the members of Congress to do what comes naturally to them, which is to water everything down to get a compromise. It finished at 21, but very close to the target.
Yeah, I mean, Congress needs that kind of template. They need something to, you know, work around. And also I think we should credit the fact that the Republicans kind of knew where the traps were in writing tax legislation. I mean, you go back to former Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp, I think it was back around 2007, proposed a bill. He was succeeded at Ways and Means by Paul Ryan. They'd been working on this for a long time. It's not as though this was, you know, born out of the ethers. And then, of course, Kevin Brady, an extraordinary Ways and Means chairman, incredibly patient, but they knew where the mistakes, they knew where the dangers were, and they anticipated them. Now, it was hard by the end of it. It was the sausage factory, but this was unlike health care, which, as Kate was suggesting, was just an open-ended free-for-all. This one was more disciplined.
Kim, I remember talking to Paul Ryan once, who said, when I was talking at the beginning of this Congress, and he said, look, I've already been through the 20 stages of grief in trying to write a tax bill and dealing with all the trade-offs and all the pain involved in taking away one loophole to get a rate cut. And a lot of the members hadn't. So, but having done that spade work really made a huge difference.
And they have worked on this for a decade at least. And look, I think one thing that's got overlooked in all of this is that when it came down to it, people have focused on some of these big deductions that did get saved in the bill. You know, we still have a mortgage interest deduction, still have the charitable giving deduction, the compromise that they did on SALT, state and local property taxes. But a lot of junk went away. So in that regard, this was a reform, because in the end, that was the only way that they could get, in the end, to those lower rates, was to get rid of a lot of the giveaways and make it a cleaner code. And that's a big victory in this bill as well.
Kim, what do you make of the relationship between Donald Trump and Capitol Hill coming out of this? Do you think what does it tell us about that lesson? Because remember, they didn't work very well together on health care, but on this one they did.
No, the outpouring of love is something to behold from both directions.
Right. And
but
some of it's phony, I must say.
I would say so too. But look, the important message that has come out of this is I think both sides have wondered at times if there's value in working with each other. And what this has shown is that there is value, that the entire party benefits. So those Republicans who've been a little wary of this president, they're still going to go after him when he's off course. But I think some of them were worried that, you know, it wasn't to their benefit to work with him at all. They've changed their mind. And Donald Trump realizes there's no benefit of calling Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan a bunch of establishment phonies. They can get stuff done.
And not a single Democrat, Kate. How do you explain that?
Well, I think in some sense the party has moved left since 1986, when Democrats helped write the 1986 bill, not alone just pass it. You had Bill Bradley from New Jersey, who was proposing lower top rates for exchanging carve-outs, which is now basically essentially a Republican position.
But even in 2001 rather, a dozen Democrats worked with George Bush.
Right. I mean, I think Democrats are betting on even in a better economy, people's personal distaste for Trump and the high intensity of the resistance to him is going to make them turn out and vote for Democrats, and so they don't want anything to do with the tax bill.
I do think that Republicans would be smart to manage expectations. And I think one big mistake the president's making is to talk about the stock market.
Yeah.
Because the stock market is going to behave as it's going to behave, and there's a lot of external factors that could affect it.
Sure.
And that will not mean that the tax reform was not good, but if he ties them together, that will damage people's opinion of the reform.
I think one thing we know, Mary, the stock market is going to go down at some point, and you don't want to be hostage to that politically.
And we'll see next year. You know, people are going to get these tax cuts in their paychecks. The Democrats are relying on opinion polls because the press has been very negative about this. 17% of people think they're not going to get a tax cut. About 80% will. And as that develops over the course of next year, I think attitudes towards this bill are going to change. And Democrats are going to be standing there saying, we were against the whole thing.
All right, still ahead as companies like AT&T, Comcast, and Wells Fargo react to the GOP tax plan. We'll take a closer look at its economic impact in 2018 and beyond.
No matter how the markets change, at T. Rowe Price, our disciplined approach remains. Global markets may be uncertain, but you can feel confident in our investment experience around the world. Call us or your advisor. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence.
Critics are all in for Molly's Game, and now it's been nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards, including Best Actress Jessica Chastain and Best Screenplay Aaron Sorkin.
It's just a friendly game with higher stakes.
Molly's Game, rated R.
When one of you joins the Alliance, the battle begins. Build the greatest fortress. Command the fiercest army. And summon the mightiest of allies. What are you waiting for? Join the adventure. Final Fantasy 15, A New Empire. Download and play now. Free from the App Store.
You'll get some presents this Christmas. A book, a picture, a sweater you don't really like. But your best present is coming from a very unexpected place. Republicans in Congress just passed the biggest tax reform in 30 years. 300,000 new jobs, an extra $2,000 for middle-class families. No, you haven't had too much eggnog. Republicans in Congress really are letting you keep more of your hard-earned money. So happy tax cuts to all, and to all a good night.
The morning walk was so peaceful, until it wasn't. Don't let type 2 diabetes get between you and your heart. Even if you reach your A1C goal, you are still at risk for heart attack or stroke. Talk to your healthcare provider today about diabetic heart disease. And find out more at heartoftype2.com. Your heart and type 2 diabetes. Make the connection.
You can beat the world, you can beat the war. You could touch a bad dog banging on his door. You can throw your hands up, you can beat the clock. You can move a mountain, you can break rocks. You can be a master, don't wait for luck. Dedicate yourself and you can find yourself. Stand in the Hall of Fame. And the world's gonna know your name. And you'll be on the walls of the Hall of Fame. Be a champion on the walls of the Hall of Fame. Be students, be teachers, be politicians, be preachers. Yeah, yeah. Be believers, be leaders, be astronauts, be champions. Standing in the Hall of Fame.
We're going to see something that's going to be very special. We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to see. You're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
President Trump touting the economic benefits of the Republican tax cut, promising they'll create jobs and bring entrepreneurs back to the United States. Scott Hodge is president of the Tax Foundation, which released its analysis of the bill this week. Among the highlights, over the next decade, the plan will boost GDP by 1.7%. Jobs. So, Scott Hodge, welcome. Good to have you back. You know,
thank you, Paul.
Scott, I'm looking at that economic impact, and you know, it's not all that large. large, and it's not as large as some of the prediction, your analysis of some of the proposals, as opposed to this final legislation. What happened in the end to reduce your expectations?
Well, Paul, there are really two economic stories here. One's the long term, and the other is the short term. And as you know, so many provisions in this bill have been sunset after about 7 years that the long-term prospects for growth are quite small. And you're seeing it there in those results. That's really the result of only cutting the corporate tax rate. Now, in the short term, because we have 5 years of temporary full expensing for capital investment, we are seeing a great deal more growth. And that is, in fact, we see the economy growing, instead of 2% growth, about 2.4 to 2.5% growth over the next couple of years. So really, unless we see a lot of those temporary provisions made permanent, we're going to see a lot of this growth taper off at the end of the next decade.
Elected every 2 years, a new Congress, so they can do what they want with the tax code, and I guarantee you they will.
Sure.
So, but if you're saying that if some of those provisions, like expensing, which only lasts 5 years, if that's extended, then you'll get the greater growth in the future too.
As a good example of that, we modeled this plan as though it were permanent and found that it would boost the long-term level of the economy by 4.7%.
Okay.
So it's about 3 times what we got because of all the temporary provisions. So there's a great deal of promise here if all of this is made permanent.
Okay, and one of the reasons they didn't make it permanent was because they had to fit all those the numbers inside that 10-year budget window that Congress has concocted for itself. So they can revisit this policy and extend those if need be. I want to deal with you. Talk to you about some of the criticisms that are leveled at this bill, and let's go through them one by one. One of which is that this is really a tax increase on the middle class, as Nancy Pelosi says. Is that true?
No, in fact, everybody gets a tax cut in the middle class. In fact, even the Liberal Tax Policy Center at Brookings said this plan will knock over 4 million people, low-income people, off the tax rolls, increasing the amount of non-payers to about 48% of all filers. That's incredible. That means that actually this plan is much more progressive than what the left is owning up to.
Okay, now people also say, well, look, the business corporate tax cuts here are permanent, but the middle class tax cuts go away, therefore it favors business.
Well, as you know, lower corporate tax rates eventually translate into higher productivity and higher wages. There's a ton of economic research to show that that's true. And so we're actually showing that wages will rise by at least 1.5%, probably even more as we go on through the next decade.
All right. Now, is this another criticism? Is this an incentive, as the Washington Post wrote, for businesses to move capital overseas because of the new, basically a corporate minimum tax?
Goodness, no. I think that the 21% corporate tax rate will be a tremendous incentive for companies to bring a lot of those activities back. In fact, I think it'll bring a lot of activity from foreign-owned companies to the United States. I think the people that ought to be worried here are the politicians in Germany and France and Japan who have extremely high corporate tax rates now. We've leapfrogged over to them from becoming one of the least competitive countries to now one of the most competitive tax systems in the entire world.
In fact, there's a study out of Germany from last week that suggested exactly that, and I suspect you're going to see Germany and France and maybe other countries cut their corporate tax rates as well to stay competitive. Now, the other big criticism that's leveled here is the deficit. It basically says, you know, it's a 1.5 trillion formal number that they allowed under the tax bill to increase the deficit, and some people say, well, it's going to be much larger than that because of the sunsetting tax provisions that we discussed earlier. What's your response to that?
Well, even with the modest economic growth that our models suggest that this plan will generate, it's going to generate about $5 trillion worth of new GDP over the next decade. And that's going to, in turn, going to produce about $1 trillion worth of new tax revenues for the federal government. So the overall cost of this plan will fall from about $1.5 trillion to less than $500 billion. That's $50 billion a year in order to get $5 trillion worth of new GDP. I think that's a pretty good trade.
But is there a chance that, in fact, it could actually generate more revenue if growth if we get growth up to 3% for 2, 3, 4 years, it's going to be even higher than that?
Oh, certainly, and especially if a lot of these provisions are made permanent, we are going to see that growth continue for as long as the eye can see. And that's all good for both federal treasury and the economy.
All right, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. When we come back, despite strong signs that the GOP tax bill will help the economy, polls show that Americans are less than enthusiastic about the plan. So can Republicans sell it to voters ahead of the 2018 midterms?
It's all pop culture trivia, but it gets pretty intense.
The new guy. Wow.
He looks exactly like me.
No.
Separated at birth much? We should switch name tags and no one would know who is who.
Jamie, you seriously think you look like him?
I'm pretty good with comparisons. Like how Progressive helps people save money by comparing rates, even if they're not the lowest. Whoa! Wow. I mean, the outfit helps, but pretty great. Look at us.
At Wayfair.com, we think that when the big stuff ships free, it's just better.
Cover better, brunch better, crunch better, rock better, roll better, whoa better, dream better, clean better, yeah, better!
Oh, Wayfair has free shipping. Game changer.
Fast better, free better, everything's better when
Get
it's
free shipping on orders over $49. Shop better at Wayfair.com.
Wayfair, you've got just what I need.
I do quite a bit of holiday shopping, and I use Ebates for all of it. I earn cash back just by doing the shopping I was going to do anyway.
It gives you cash back on anything and everything that you buy for your family.
Not only do I get all my holiday shopping done in a short amount of time, I get money back for doing so.
I could use that cash back to buy more gifts, or actually a gift for myself.
Sign up for free, shop at your favorite stores, get paid. Join today and get a $10 bonus at ebates.com.
When heartburn hits, fight back fast with Tums Chewy Bites. Fast relief in every bite, crunchy outside, chewy inside. Tums Chewy Bites.
The unknown is a seduction.
Oh!
No. Science! The wonder
of Star Talk.
Star Talk. New episode tonight at 11.
Only on National Geographic.
We go inside Eisenhower's final days in office and the final mission of an American giant. Watch as Brett Baer anchors 3 Days in January, tonight.
Oh my gosh, that's Frank Thomas. No. Yes, that's him. Go ahead. Excuse me, are you Frank Thomas?
Yes, I am.
I bet you get recognized a lot.
I was a pretty good ball player.
You were?
Some people thought so.
Sorry, we recognize you from those Nugenix commercials.
Oh, yeah? That's great.
So does Nugenix really work?
Oh, yeah. Difference. My workouts are better, and I feel a lot more energetic.
I wish my husband would use Nugenix.
It's so easy to get started. All you have to do is send one simple text.
Text 321321 and enter TIGHT for a complimentary bottle of award-winning Nugenix, the #1 selling free testosterone booster at GNC. Its unique man-boosting formula is powered by Testofen, a patented key ingredient clinically researched to help a man feel stronger, leaner, more energetic, and more passionate.
And you're going to like the difference, too.
Text 321321 and enter TIGHT for a complimentary bottle of Nugenix. Samples are not available in stores. Text 321321 and enter TIGHT.
What this represents is a promise that each and every one of us made to the American people last year is a promise that is kept today.
We have a simple message for our Republican friends. Republicans will rue the day they pass this bill, and you can bet Democrats will make sure of that.
Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill spinning very different tales of the tax cuts. So how will the bill's passage play out in 2018? We're back with Dan Henninger, Kim Strassel, Kate Batchelder-Odell, and Wall Street Journal columnist William McGurn. All right, Dan, can Republicans sell this thing, and what do they have to do to sell it?
Well, it's not as though they're trying to sell merely an idea. They have passed an enormous tax reform of the entire tax code. They have reduced tax rates, indeed, on the middle class, on corporations. You've got perhaps $2.5 trillion of overseas money being repatriated back to the United States. The economic effects, I think, are going to be pretty significant, and they're going to have to wait until at least mid-year to see what's happening, and then they're going to have to be able to cite that as the result of what they did in passing this bill. Against that, we just saw Chuck Schumer saying this is a disaster. There is an almost mindlessness to the Democrats' opposition on this bill. They're the ones who presided over less than 2% growth for 8 years of the Obama years. You come up to the possibility of rewriting the tax code, and they say we will not participate. Not only will we not participate, they have no alternative other than to oppose what is going on.
Paychecks in February, withholding will increase. Kate, presumably that will help if you actually have a job and you get a more take-home pay. But why is the bill so unpopular now?
Well, I mean, we've had press coverage that, as we've discussed, has been very skewed, and people perceive that they're getting a tax increase when they're not. And yes, we'll sort that out in February. But I think also, it must be fun to be Chuck Schumer and get to predict Armageddon and have no one hold you accountable when it happens.
Or if it doesn't.
If it doesn't happen, excuse me. But also, the left is making this argument. We've seen corporations have said, hey, we're going to give $1,000 bonuses to some of our employees, and the left saying, hey, what's $1,000? And that tells you more about the world they live in than it does the GOP.
Bill, pretty extraordinary this week. I mean, AT&T came out $1,000 bonus for 200,000 employees. Right. Comcast for another 100,000 employees. A lot of companies starting to do this, and the response is, oh well, who cares? I mean, that's just PR. Well, you get a $1,000 check.
Well, I think
I'll take it.
Right. I think that gets to the real question for 2018. It's not the political question. A lot of people that would normally vote Democratic put Donald Trump in office because they thought he was going to recover the economy in some way and make their lives better. And the question is whether they feel that. And this $1,000, to dismiss that for families, for mom and dad saying this might be a new TV or piano lessons for someone, that it's really foolish, I think, to dismiss. And if you look at the Democratic, I mean, the party operates this way. They say their stuff, but you're a football player in college. This is the 12th man on the field, is the crowd, the press, the coverage of the tax cuts, victims of the Trump tax cuts and so forth. It's mind-boggling.
Go ahead, Kate.
No, and I was just going to add, these bonuses that we're seeing, they're the icing on the cake. What we have been talking about for several months is that when you cut corporate taxes, you spur investment and you make workers more productive. That is what leads to long-term wage growth, not that companies decide to give away more money that they keep directly at the end of the year.
And yet, Kim, we have often seen in some midterm elections, which usually help the opposition for the party in the White House, that sometimes a faster economy, faster growth doesn't necessarily translate into votes if the president himself is unpopular. So that's still a risk here for the Republicans.
Correct. And the time frame here is short in that, look, this bill will have some immediate effects. We've seen that from corporations, and it will help long-term growth or longer-term growth. How quickly that kicks in and the sense of well-being that a growing economy leaves with people, and can they connect that to a president who on a daily basis often manages to offend people. We just saw what happened when you had the president and his poor approval ratings hanging around the neck of Ed Gillespie, who was the Republican running for governor in Virginia, and he lost and lost fairly badly in a state that should have been gettable. So this is, I think, the bigger question is, can the Republicans running in the midterms run on that tax success without necessarily running hip and hip with an unpopular president if he still is at that point?
Yeah, and it's going to affect politics next year. The Republicans talked about wanting to reform Medicare and Social Security. Mitch McConnell said at the end of the week, I'm not doing that unless I have Democratic support, taking a big piece of legislative activity off the table.
All right, still ahead, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe grilled on Capitol Hill this week. His testimony reportedly raising more questions than answers as Republican lawmakers get set to issue new subpoenas in the Russia probe.
My arthritis pain used to make my favorite things to do painful, but now with odor-free Blue Emu Maximum Arthritis Cream, I can enjoy life's big moments and life's little ones. Blue Emu Maximum Arthritis Cream. Beat the pain and enjoy life.
No, I think you have the wrong house, sir. What you doing? Hey, man, don't do it.
Looks like you're not sleeping well.
Yeah. How did you know? Hey, Megan!
What? Hey, you're that guy.
The My Pillow guy.
That's right, and I'm here to help you get the best sleep of your lives. Oh, you have a down pillow. Here's the problem with down pillows. You lay there, you feel comfortable, and guess what? It goes down, and you got one bent neck. So this pillow's no good, and I see you sleeping on memory foam.
Right.
Well, I'll show you what's wrong with that idea.
Okay.
Sleep's all about too high or too low, and I'm going to show you where your comfort level would be.
So, you know, that feels better.
Right, that's better, but I'm not going to sit and hold this all day. So every morning you're getting up like, you know, it's not good. Just like all of you out there, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and none of them worked. That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck aligned. My Pillow will hold its shape all night long, regardless of your sleep position, for the best sleep of your life.
It feels great to wake up in the morning and feel well rested. It's shocking to me that a pillow could make this big of a difference in my life.
Would be.
So, you know, that feels better.
Right, that's better, but I'm not going to. My
could make.
But right now, our bond is framed. How do we get back to us? The Y fills the gaps and bridges our divides. Donate to your local Y today. Because where there's a Y, there's an us.
It's a frozen world, but right now it's thawing out.
Every day counts out here in the summer.
You work till the sun goes down.
Summer is a season of opportunity, and I've got to grab it.
This is life without a clock.
You always got to think ahead.
If you don't produce, you die.
Life Below Zero, The Thaw. New season starts Thursday, January 4th at 9 on National Geographic.
New developments this week in the Russia probe as Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe faced 2 days of questioning on Capitol Hill, and according to House intelligence sources, his closed-door testimony before that committee on Tuesday raised more questions than it answered. Congressional investigators say McCabe's 7-hour testimony conflicted with statements from previous witnesses, prompting Republicans to mull new subpoenas for FBI and Justice Department staff. We're back with Dan Henninger, Kim Strassel, and Bill McGurn. So, Kim, what is the big takeaway here from the McCabe testimony? What should we know about it?
The biggest one is what Republicans did or did not learn about this infamous dossier and the FBI and DOJ's use of that in their decision to launch a counterintelligence probe into President Trump.
This is the Steele dossier, the
McCabe
so-called Steele dossier.
The Steele. Yes, that was commissioned by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. McCabe was asked about what they did, and he was at great pains to stress all the efforts that the FBI and DOJ went to corroborate some of the allegations in it. But what's interesting here is apparently, in the end, he had to admit that the only thing that they could find in it that was true was that a Trump satellite operator, Carter Page, once traveled to Russia. Nothing else. So I think that raises more questions because if they couldn't find anything true in it, were they nonetheless still using it as part of a probe or as a justification for getting wiretaps on Trump campaign officials?
And Carter Page has admitted he took a trip to Moscow.
Right. If this is the only thing they had, then the question is, what did they use if they used it at all in the application for a FISA warrant. I think Congress,
which is extraordinary. Just step back for a second. They basically asked a court, if it's true, based on a dossier commissioned by the opposition campaign, to have the FBI able to spy on a presidential campaign.
Almost a year and a half later, the assistant FBI director can verify only one fact, a travel fact about Clarence Page. It's really outrageous. The House, other committees are becoming involved, oversight, judiciary, and they need to see the FBI files. There's a file in this case. They need to see those files. The other larger question is, the more the investigation goes on, the more the questions are about the investigators. It doesn't mean that Bob Mueller's dishonest. But when he first assembled this team, remember we were told these are strict professionals. These are people very professional. They're entitled to their opinions. And we have an FBI agent who's supposed to be a counterintelligence guy squawking to his mistress, you know, about Trump and opening himself up to all sorts of vulnerability to blackmail with an affair. We've got Andrew Weissman, who, you know, applauded an Obama holdover for defying a presidential order. We've got Bruce Orr, his wife is working for the people that produced the document. I mean, do you get the word professional when you read those actions? And it's, I think they're largely discrediting themselves.
But none of this, of course, relates to the central question, Dan, of collusion. And Senator Mark Warner, who is the ranking Democrat on Senate Intelligence, said this week that he thinks actually there's more fire than smoke, and he's not releasing any details, but he thinks this is the biggest thing he's ever going to do in his professional career. And he warned the president, if you fire Mueller, this is a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, well, we're coming up with sayings here. There's a little boy who cried wolf over and over again when there was no wolf, and no one would believe him. I mean, after listening to Bill go through all of these issues, roll back to why we are here. Way back in January, the story of collusion emerged, and every media outlet in Washington, the allegation, every media outlet in Washington was running stories based on anonymous intelligence sources that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Then we get a special prosecutor. We roll all the way up here to December. One of the top officials of the FBI, McCabe, goes and appears before Congress, and the best he can give them is that Carter Page visited somebody in Russia. So both the members of Congress and these committees and the American people are at the point of asking, what is going on here with this investigation? Why haven't we reached a closure or a more...
Further to Dan's point, go back at the beginning. Devin Nunes was ridiculed.
He is the chairman of the House Intelligence
was
Committee.
Ridiculed on a crazy man for what he was doing. They trumped up some charges against him in the Ethics Committee, which were dismissed, but designed to handicap the investigation. Look, I think the House and Senate are getting close to answers. And if you watch the hearings now, and you watch, for example, Christopher Wray deal with Congress.
The FBI director now.
FBI director, and so Rod Rosenstein. Congress wants the documents. They have a right to the documents. It's extraordinary that we have federal agencies telling the elected representatives of the American people that they can't see the documents they need to do their job to override. I think there's more subpoenas coming, and I think there's going to be some contempt findings if they don't turn this around.
Do you think, briefly, Bill, that the Democrats want Trump to fire Mueller?
Oh, absolutely. Why would Donald Trump fire Mueller now when his team has all become the subject of discussion? I mean, I think he has the constitutional authority to do it, but I don't think
it would be unwise,
unprudent to do it at this point. And now we need more questions about the investigators.
All right, still ahead. Amid rising global threats, the president outlined his administration's national security strategy this week. What it tells us about the emerging Trump doctrine next.
After my DVT blood clot, I had a lot on my mind. Could this happen again? Was my warfarin treatment right for me? My doctor told me about Eliquis. Eliquis treats DVT and PE blood clots and reduces the risk of them happening again. Not only does Eliquis treat DVT and PE blood clots, Eliquis also has significantly less major bleeding than the standard treatment. Eliquis had both, and that turned around my thinking.
Don't stop Eliquis unless your doctor tells you to. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have